the sickness submerged beneath the cosmopolitan veneer. Better than food, man. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Better Than Food Book Reviews. I'm your host, Clifford Lee Sargent. Great to see you as always. Hope you're doing well. Get that coffee. Delicious. That's the Don Cesar Hotel in St. Petersburg in the intro there, and Fitzgerald actually went there and hung out at one point, which is interesting. I think with Zelda, I'm not sure. I couldn't afford to go inside. It's quite heavily monitored, and I didn't have Fitzgerald's budget, I'll just say. Also, I am selling these bookmarks. I don't have a website or anything. You can just hit me up using the email below. They're $4 each. Plus shipping, so it'll be cheaper in the United States and more expensive for international, but I'm happy to send you a quote. I think I've discovered a way to actually cut down on the international shipping costs if you're only ordering a few. It involves a lot of stamps, but I think I've got it. If you'd be so kind as to help support the show and spread the word about great books, you can hit me up using the email below, and I sincerely appreciate it. Thank you so much. So today I'm reviewing The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald, a much beloved American classic. It is a beautiful cover, that painting there, yeah. My good friend and patron Aisha reminded me of this one. Thank you. She recently had a birthday as well, and so I'm a little late wishing it publicly, but a very happy birthday to you, Aisha, and I hope you're doing well. I think this is the beginning for me of an interesting journey with Fitzgerald. I just reviewed Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea, and him and Fitzgerald were friends while him and Zelda were staying over in Paris. The whole lost generation thing. Many American students have read The Great Gatsby in high school. I never did. I'm one of the rare few who did not get an introduction to Fitzgerald in high school. Never read it. Never read it. So this was my first time, ever. 32 years old, big fan of literature, never read The Great Gatsby. This will contain some spoilers, and for those of you who have not read it, I would say it's actually pretty important to not get the spoilers, because I mean, a lot of I think the enjoyment of the book the first time round is dependent on the surprises. So you might want to just go and read that. I mean, it's like it's very, very short. So I think this review is best if you've already read the book, really. The Great Gatsby is a short novel by the American author F. Scott Fitzgerald about a mysterious young figure named J. Gatsby who lives in a wealthy part of Long Island. It's kind of a sort of a New York novel in spirit. Jazz era New York. The story is told through the eyes of the narrator, Gatsby's neighbor Nick Carraway, who is of far more humble means than Gatsby, who is outlandishly wealthy. He went to school with one of them, and it turns out he was in the war with Gatsby himself, so he has these connections. It also has elements of the crime, detective, or noir novel. And he describes this group of wealthy socialites, I think you'd call them, party people, and their intricate relationships, all of which lead to a tragic demise, which represents many things, but largely a criticism of and meditation on wealth, class, and the struggle to achieve the American dream in the 1920s, when this country was wild and very, very different. I'm going to assume the vast majority of you already know the story, so I won't spoil too much, I hope, for those that don't. Depending on which best American novels of all time list you're reading, this one is likely right near the top with like Adventures of Huckleberry Finn and Moby Dick. I recently rewatched Fellini's La Dolce Vita, and it's striking. There are some similar themes for sure, yet I gotta say I prefer La Dolce Vita, which is much darker than I remember actually. After several viewings at different times in my life, it just gets darker and darker. That is a very dark film. The Great Gatsby is a dark book. Maybe Fellini was influenced by Fitzgerald and The Great Gatsby. Both are disturbing x-rays into the kind of untouchable, warped culture of the elite. Both stories are critiques of the nihilistic, celebratory excesses of the extravagantly wealthy. If you've never seen La Dolce Vita, it's very, very good. I think it was Roger Ebert's favorite. If you've never seen it, like you have to watch it. It's amazing. Highly recommend it. You see, what's so interesting is that Fitzgerald actually wrote a book called The Beautiful and the Damned that did make him famous. And he starts rolling in those high circles and trying to stay there, you know, except he's working for it and is constantly under threat of falling from grace, it seems. You know, he's actually trying to maintain his position, whereas others were just sort of born into it. And The Great Gatsby, written afterwards, was a commentary on that. But The Great Gatsby was a flop. No wonder I felt the desperation behind the book, right? There was a real dire, true, desperate need. You know, his societal position is dependent on the reception of this book, and it completely fails, you know? So Gatsby died in poverty, and what I just thought of a minute ago was interesting, and that is that Fellini, in his old age, nobody would give him any money either. Same with Orson Welles, who made Citizen Kane on a crazy, crazy stroke of luck. And it just happens to be like the greatest film ever made. Early success can really kind of kill you. It's weird. It's disturbing. So The Great Gatsby, though. For all of the kind things that I can say about it, some of which I will, of course, I didn't enjoy it. A caveat, though, with what I'm about to say. Because it's a good book, But the book's themes could be so pervasive in American culture that I can't even see the genius anymore, because the novelty has just been recycled for decades. This book has been so influential in so many different things, in so many different ways. It's like already there when you're born. Like, it's like you just can't help but kind of know what's going on. It's like the American story, right? It's just so influential that it's really hard to appreciate it. It isn't that I don't like the writing. I do. It's excellent. It isn't that I don't like the critique of the disillusioned, callous, and miserable certain members of the upper class. I think it's great. It's often accurate, I'd imagine. I'm sure it was an influence on, things going all the way to like American Psycho. There are and have been people who unquestionably buy their way out of everything and who use their wealth to exploit the weaknesses of others. I've seen it. It's repulsive. It's not that I disagree with his depiction of the American dream as this corrupt and rigged game, which it seems he believes is still worth striving for, nonetheless, against all the odds, in a kind of strange, hallucinatory, big, grand, fabulous lie destined to fail. The Meyer Wolfsheim and, the Arnold Rothstein, the actual criminal who rigged the 1919 World Series, all that stuff it's compelling. Kinda. And it's not that I dislike the romance of that era, the jazz era. The music, the fashion, the architecture, the aesthetic, the illegal drinks, the parties, all that. The Art Deco, the flapper thing. Yeah, it's all fun. I think I'm about 12 years too late to the party. This is the one to read when you're like 20. Or 21, 22. Back when I first learned who Django Reinhardt was, that kind of thing. When all this shit is cool. I wanted to enjoy the novel. I felt I was going into it with a pretty open mind. And everything seemed right there, waiting to grab me. I'm definitely not gonna tear it apart, because how can I? It's a fine book, excellent in its writing, construction, and execution, widely considered one of the greatest American novels ever written, if not the greatest, written by one of the greatest American authors. And yet, just flatlining for me the whole time. In all honesty, aside from maybe the first 10 pages or so, I think I got a laugh out of there. I was yawning the whole way through. That is the honest truth. I've got to be honest with you. I just did not care. It's not a bad book, but I was very bored. Very, very bored. I'm not trying to be a smartass or irreverent, I'm not. I have nothing to gain from that. It's my loss. It is an American classic. It's called the greatest American novel by experts. I'll just assume that they're correct, I'm not fighting. And it certainly, outside of America, it certainly resonates with many people around the world. I wasn't impressed. I was not impressed at all. It made no impression on me. It left me so cold. Maybe I'm just too jaded. I don't know. Or I've just seen it without reading the original, I waited too long. There are some books I think you miss the boat, or maybe you just gotta wait for the next one. You gotta wait for the next decade where it resonates. So I very well may read this one again. Upon recommendation of Chris from Leaf by Leaf, because I told him what my reaction was, and he recommended I listen to Maureen Corrigan, who wrote a book on The Great Gatsby and who is the book critic for NPR's Fresh Air. I didn't go get her book. Maybe it's actually worth reading. So if anybody has read that, please let me know in the comments below. I listened to an interview with her on YouTube, and it was good. It was fine. I used some things from that talk in this review. So if you want to check it out, you can click on the link below. Specifically, the whole idea of striving in the American dream against the odds, knowing that the game is rigged, basically. And the idea of the theme of striving even with the knowledge of death, a theme that is also very much central to The Old Man and the Sea by Hemingway, which I just reviewed. And while for me, in The Great Gatsby, the strongest parts of the book were those moments, where the narrator turns 30 and the idea of time slipping away creeps in. And the last line of the book, which is certainly a good one and sort of a little prophetic in the proximity of Fitzgerald's own death, which will come not super long after this book is finished. He died at 44. All of these moments are the better parts of the book, and yet there's something so bloodless, so hollow, so caricaturistic, that it's as if you're reading about the lives and deaths of mannequins. Perfectly placed pieces on a chessboard, but obviously so, instead of subtly, instead of realistically, like in great works of art. Nothing in this novel felt real to me. Nothing, not one thing, except one scene. And you can probably guess which one I'm talking about. Nick Carraway himself barely seems real, having no other purpose in life to be the middleman, the camera lens and judge of the actions of Gatsby and the Buchanans. There was an unshakable feeling of affectation throughout the whole thing. Granted, I know that's the point to some extent, right? You know, and look at me, I'm completely affected, and I enjoy affected shit, right? But it was like affectation beyond even the affectation. It was almost meta. Right? Or something. I'm trying to figure it out. I'm trying to wrap my head around it. You know, you could feel the author behind the pages, right? Maybe it's that cloying desperation that emanates from the book. That terrified neediness. That awareness of death. That desires above all that you enjoy it and appreciate it and praise it and validate it. Maybe that's what I'm sensing and am repulsed by, because I've been guilty of the same thing. And often still am. Not that I'm comparing myself in any way to the talent of Fitzgerald. It's just something I feel that maybe I recognize. Maybe. I don't know. But even in its philosophical insights, you know, i.e. death is coming very quickly, there was this deep feeling of, maybe not insincerity, because it's entirely possible that Fitzgerald was trying to be sincere, that he was, but that he was preoccupied with the wrong things in life. I liked none of the characters, none of them. Even though Gatsby's introduction to Nick Carraway and Carraway's description of him was great, is terrific and almost had me. It really showed that Fitzgerald was onto something. So that was maybe the first moment where it was like, well, this dude can seriously write. Nick's at the party saying that he's at Gatsby's party and he's saying, oh, I can't find this Gatsby fellow. I'm his next door neighbor and I don't even know where he is or whatever. I haven't even met him. And Gatsby himself is the one he's addressing. I thought you knew, old sport. I'm afraid I'm not a very good host. He smiled understandingly, much more than understandingly. It was one of those rare smiles with a quality of eternal reassurance in it that you may come across 4 or 5 times in life. It faced, or seemed to face, the whole external world for an instant, and then concentrated on you with an irresistible prejudice in your favor. It understood you just as far as you wanted to be understood, believed in you as you would like to believe in yourself, and assured you that it had precisely the impression of you that, at your best, you hoped to convey. Precisely at that point it vanished, and I was looking at an elegant young roughneck, a year or 2 over 30, whose elaborate formality of speech just missed being absurd. Some time before he introduced himself, I got a strong impression that he was picking his words with care. I liked that. I thought that was a great passage. I did. I feel like it's really important for me to figure out why I didn't enjoy this book, but I haven't gotten to the bottom of it yet, and I feel like I'm probably going to return to it. I'm definitely going to read it again. See, because this is the interesting thing. Even Corrigan says it's overly patterned and overly designed. And she also says, you know, this woman who really, really likes this book, to the point where she's read it 60 times and written a book on it, that on first read, she didn't care for it. That's reassuring to me. That's encouraging. And that's why I'm suspicious of my own impression. That's why I think my impression is wrong. And I'd love to know, those of you who really love this book, why you love it. Like, what about this is so good. So I'm working through this, as you can see, and I'm really trying to understand why I didn't enjoy it. Sometimes I may sound harsh, but it's with good intention, I assure you. This is kind of like detective work for me. It seems much less about any real individual human experience than a kind of overarching idea about class and the American dream and the spirit of the era and so on. The strokes are just too broad. I'm just not interested in those kinds of novels. I'm not interested in that. That's why I didn't like Brave New World, because even though it was fine, it just caricatures. It was completely just hollow characters on a chessboard. It's just so inhuman in its perfection, in its inorganic plot device. You know, a lot of it to me just kind of felt like boring melodrama. My wife brought up a great thing though, which was the idea of this peeling back the layers of the glamour and illusion to reveal the sick, dark events underneath. The sickness submerged beneath the cosmopolitan veneer. See, that's what I like about literature and its power to excavate that. And I think that's actually a compelling premise and realization that's sincere and insightful. And Fitzgerald probably saw that in the circles he was running with at one point. There's nothing wrong with glamour and the aesthetic. I don't know. It just felt. Maybe Fitzgerald knew about the darkness underneath, but he was still enamored with that culture. It was something for him nevertheless, to strive for. I didn't approach it in the right way. I think if I'd been expecting a crime novel, you know, or kind of a film noir thing, I might have enjoyed it more. The greatest part in the book was when Myrtle Wilson was hit and killed by the car. Because for once there was this urgent intimacy that broke through the numbed reality and world of the characters and their squabbling. For once things had actual consequences and weren't so fancifully idealized. It was like the end of Madame Bovary's elusive web of lies, when she finally grabs the arsenic and stuffs it in her mouth, right? She kills herself. Sorry if you haven't read it. That's a great moment in literature. That's real stuff. Really actually shocking, it seems. For once there wasn't the lofty reminiscences or descriptions, but rather the very base fact of blood mingling with dust on the road at night. Base reality. Truth. And that was very well done on Fitzgerald's part. He made it quite gruesome, really quite graphic. And it was a stunning contrast to the rest of the novel. And that was nicely placed. It was a well-placed scene. You know, you felt it. You really felt it. But yeah, he's just so tidy. He's just such a perfectionist, it seems. I don't know. There's just something about that kind of refinement which really rubbed me the wrong way. The final hideous irony is that while today it's considered a masterpiece and is extremely successful, The Great Gatsby, after it was published, left Fitzgerald with like no financial relief. His last royalty check for The Great Gatsby in 1940, before he died, was $13.13, which is like $257.42 by today's standards. You know, it just goes to show, again, you can write what is going to be considered an American classic and just be left in the gutter. Which is kind of like the point of The Great Gatsby in itself. Like, why try? The American dream, it's rigged. It's already fucked. You know, it's the Hunter S. Thompson thing. You know, what Hunter S. Thompson would develop in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, you know, and kind of expound upon. So Fitzgerald wrote The Great Gatsby in the early 20s. When he was in his 20s, it was inspired by his love/obsession for this woman named Zelda Sayer. Zelda was a wealthy girl who initially rejected Fitzgerald because he didn't have enough money, which you'll see is a direct influence on the narrative in this book. That's all it is. It's a guy who's rejected by a woman and is trying to pull off a very long-term, elaborate scheme of making a lot of money to win her back. And in the meantime, this girl, born rich, placed, you know, in her own way, in kind of a rock and a hard place, has to choose whether or not to marry one man or wait for Gatsby, who has gone off to war and done very well, and then comes back and kind of like builds his way back up. And so one of the things the book does is really show the lives of women, wealthy or not, in the 20s. It's brutal. You know, it's not easy at all. They're really dealt a bad hand in that era, wealthy or not. But eventually in real life, Fitzgerald and Zelda, you know, fell passionately in love, but were partying and drinking really heavily. Fitzgerald was an alcoholic, Zelda too. He was inspired by Zelda to the point where it's been said that he actually plagiarized her work, as in he stole creatively from her, because she was a writer too. As far as The Great Gatsby, I don't think that's the case, but, you know, I'm no expert. According to Wikipedia, the end of their legendary relationship was extremely dark and tragic. Fitzgerald keeps drinking and goes and works in Hollywood, which is, we all know how that goes. Zelda was diagnosed with schizophrenia and was in and out of sanatoriums and psychiatric hospitals. Fitzgerald was drunk in LA and thought himself a failure. There are just some abysmally tragic anecdotes you can hear in the talk by Maureen Corrigan below in the description box. I won't go into them here though. But yeah, after Fitzgerald died at 44, Zelda was in a hospital, and on the day she was locked up in preparation for electroshock therapy, there was a fire, and the building caught fire, and she's locked up in her room, and she burned to death. Very dark story. Rest in peace, both of them. So for me, is it better than food? No. Just not for me. So you should read it. Probably everyone. Like, it seems like this is one you should have an opinion on. And there's probably a good chance that you're gonna love it. So I recommend it, but it's not for me. I think I'll go read The Beautiful and the Damned. All right, coffee time. For those of you who are new, thank you very much for stopping by. I take the names of all the patrons on Patreon who have donated $5 or more per video, and I place their names in this mason jar, and I pull out a name for every review, and whoever's name I pull out, I send them a hard copy of the book I'm reviewing, plus a bag of coffee, roasted by yours truly. and lately it's a delicious Rwandan. And if you'd like to get in on that and help support the show, you can go to the link below or go to patreon.com/betterthanfood and donate $5 or more per video. I sincerely appreciate it. Pledging $1 or more will get you access to the Patreon-only reviews, the Discord channel, and the Better Than Friday newsletter that I send out every Friday, which is just a list of things I'm interested in at any given time. Could be books in the pipeline, music, films, changes week to week, tons of stuff waiting for you to discover. And if you think we have similar taste, I think you'll really get a lot of value out of that. Unfortunately, international shipping is not included. Sorry about that. Thank you very much to all the patrons, and best of luck. Okay, here we go. The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. Who's gonna get it? Oh, way in there. Gene C. Thank you very much, Gene. I sincerely appreciate it. You're going to receive The Great Gatsby, plus a bag of delicious coffee, and I hope you love both. Thank you so much. That's all I've got for you today. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and please hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed this. And please remember, always bring a book, wherever you go. All right, take care of yourselves. Have a great night. Talk to you soon. Ciao.